Hello and welcome to the program. My name is Michael Finney. Today I am speaking with Isaac Young. Would you like to say hello, sir?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Glad to bring you in and talk about writing and books and publishing, audiobooks. But let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're from, what you do, anything you think is important for us to know about you as a person.
Hi, so I'm Isaac Young. I'm a writer on the online right-wing sphere. I kind of started out as a Substack essayist where I wrote a lot about various shows and media. I think my most famous works are my essays on Adventure Time and Star Trek. I'm also a fiction author. I've always wanted to be a sci-fi author ever since I was young. About 3 years ago, I published my first book called The Matryoshka Divide. I followed that up later with The Domes of Calrathia, which is a post-apocalyptic dark fantasy book. And I'm currently working on two projects right now. Giga Heroes, which is a sci-fi dystopia involving superheroes. And my main flag title, which is The Last Human, which is a science fiction story set in a grimdark future where mankind is the progenitor race of the setting, if you know that trope. Pushed to near extinction, the survivors have to struggle in a galaxy that has left them behind.
Very cool. Concise and to the point descriptions, bringing us into the world of your series and novels. So let's talk about where you got interested in writing, maybe when it began, how you fell into it, anything like that.
It was always a childhood passion of mine. I mean, I was the kid who sat in the back of class and read all day. It got to the point where my English teacher was telling me to stop reading and pay more attention. I always wanted to write books. It's just a matter of there's that I'd say intermediate phase all writers go through sometime around middle school, high school, where the passion sort of has to find a lot of real discipline before you can actually put out real products. Where you have to actually be able to, sit down and consistently write every day. And not only that, but be able to look at it with a critical eye to actually make something that's decent and worthwhile. And I feel like all of us have a few manuscripts from that period that we're glad never got published before we actually got good enough to operate online.
So you said you always wanted to be a sci-fi writer, sci-fi author. Who are some of your favorites that inspired you to follow up on it?
Um, so my dad introduced me to a lot of the greats: Michael Crichton, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. They're kind of the touchstones. Much later, I got introduced to Gene Wolfe, who probably has a greater influence on me in terms of what I want to write about um, than the previous three. Um, and I suppose those are my biggest influences besides, all the usuals of Catholic authors, like obviously Tolkien, obviously C.S. Lewis, that crowd.
Yeah, I really need to get into some Gene Wolfe. It's on my list. I just haven't
Yeah,
gotten into too much of it.
he's sort of become an online legend
Yeah,
posthumously.
yeah, unfortunately, but hey, find success when you do.
Well, it's not like he had plenty of acclaim in his time. It wasn't a Lovecraft situation where he only got famous after the fact. He was pretty well renowned.
Yeah,
Um, he's just having a bit of a Renaissance revival at the moment.
sure. How do you go about starting a project or developing a project as you continue on through it?
Well, I would say I start out with like a core idea or a theme or even like a scene that I want to tell. and then the project slowly grows around that. I mean, when I watch entertainment, I always find, like, let's say, take Firefly, for example, the television sci-fi show Firefly. There are two or three really great scenes that really stand out to me, and I can remember them now. And they're sort of these really raw emotional scenes that actually have a cinematic power behind them. And I have my own scenes in my head, and I sort of backwards construct the narrative to get to those points to deliver them as powerfully as I can. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the gist of my writing process. I like to start out with an idea, a single idea, and then just slowly build organically, layer by layer, everything around that. I mean, The Last Human, it started with I was watching this anime called Frieren, right? And in this anime, it's got the traditional stereotype of the elves as the near extinct race that lives for 1,000 years in the setting, and they're basically wiped out. And I was thinking, okay, how about we do this, but it's humanity and it's in a sci-fi setting? I think that would be pretty interesting, and it kind of builds into my themes that I like to play with a lot, especially in terms of some popular topics right now, such as civilizational decline, basically collapse of systems, and dealing with the end of institutions, essentially. I like to play with a lot of those ideas.
Do you think, as some might say, sci-fi is fantasy with technology instead of magic, or do you think that there are some other things that characterize the themes and the styles?
So I definitely agree with the point that sci-fi doesn't really have anything to do with science. It is like you pop open any science fiction book and it's essentially magic. I mean, I struggle to even think of a single science fiction property at all, which I'm not even sure if it's even possible to create a truly, as they say, soft versus hard sci-fi. I don't think hard sci-fi is even possible, realistically. So yes, I do believe that sci-fi is a fantastical genre. But I think there's a key difference that people sort of miss when they get into these debates of whether or not sci-fi is just a subgenre of fantasy. I actually kind of view it as the opposite, because sci-fi is the fantasy genre that people still believe in. Is when people were writing the Iliad or the Odyssey, yada yada yada, or you had these pagan religions where these told stories of these epics. They actually believed in at least components of those narratives. And sci-fi is the fantastical genre that people still believe in. Let's say I talk about Lord of the Rings and I talk about elves. I mean, it's assumed in any conversation that the elves are just this fantastical magic yada yada thing that doesn't exist, and it's just there to be interesting or yada yada or point to something else. Whereas science fiction, I can have a conversation with someone about Martian terraforming, right? And that would be a completely serious conversation, even though it's no less fantastical than elves. I mean, if you look into Martian terraforming, as it actually might be a feasible project, you quickly realize if we ever get into space exploration, we're probably not going to be doing much of terraforming because it's a lot of hard work. We're probably going to be building space habitats. But it's still talked about. It's still magic that people believe in, and you have all these other elements such as transhumanism, uploading minds into computers. It's all magic, but it's magic people take seriously. And so I would say that sci-fi is the fantasy genre of the modern West.
Who are some of your favorite authors out today on the scene in general? People that you're reading or that you're looking up to presently?
Um, I mean, I can name a few people who are doing some good work. Conan Esquire, and his Turquoise Serpent series is the first thing that comes to mind.
Ashes of the Urn.
The Ashes of the Urn. I really liked the first book. I see. I'm really hesitant to begin the second because I don't want to get left on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, he hasn't published the third book yet.
Yeah.
So
That's where I'm at.
he'll get a loyal reader out of me as soon as he gets the third book done.
Right. Get it done.
I really like some of King Emperor Penguin's type stuff. He also, I believe, goes by the pen name Edward White. Now, his books are directed for children, but I find his projects fascinating because no one else is really doing fiction books for children in this sphere, especially since a lot of right wing is about natalism and the importance of having children. But no, I'm sure there are other authors out there, but none in the sphere that are doing that kind of work that he did with his. I forget the name of it. It was he did a trilogy. I think it was The Lost Kingdom or something like that. And there are a few others. I mean, unfortunately, sad to say, I don't get to much reading as much as I would like to. Because I'm just so focused on trying to get my own projects off the ground. I'm currently working like 14-hour days. So my free time is literally choosing between do I get 1,000 words done or do I read?
Yeah, fair, reasonable. What is your kind of rate of production? How long does it take you to put out a book? Maybe how long are the books? What is your kind of target for a session of writing or for a novel or anything like that? Just some of the technicals.
So I'm actually a rather slow writer. I've discovered.
Same.
I put out about a chapter a week, maybe a chapter, or maybe 2 chapters a week, both ranging from like 2K to 3K words. So that's not particularly fast, especially if you're a web novelist, where sometimes audiences expect you to put out 3 chapters a week, each about 4,000 words long.
Yeah. I'll never be in that category.
Yeah, I can't. I honestly, I do think I have my suspicions about people who can put out that rate of production, because unless it's their day job, I have a feeling that they're using LLMs or they're putting out, let's just say, good enough quality work, and just let the quantity outweigh the quality. Unfortunately, there's reading has turned into another product to be binged in the modern world. It like you look on these web forum sites and you see these works and they're like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pages long. You have like works that are equaling a Song of Ice and Fire just being churned out. And it's I can't attest to the quality, but I have my suspicions about it. I have my deep suspicions about how they're producing such insane content so fast. But that's just me.
Maybe they're just very prolific writers, hard to tell.
Yeah, maybe it's hard to tell.
Personally, I do read physically, probably less now than I did in the past, just because I'm similar to you, trying to manage turning out stuff all the time. As it is this year, I'm trying to produce an audio book a month, which is plenty on your own. And you're familiar with that as well. I mean, you're turning stuff out weekly, I think.
Yeah. So for the Last Human series, it's weekly on Sundays. So I write in 10 chapter increments for each season of The Last Human. And that gives me another 10 weeks to finish up another 10 chapters, which takes about a week or 2 to get produced. And then I just start the process all over again.
How does a season relate to a novel?
So, what I'm trying to do with the show is I'm trying to structure it around the seasons, where each 10 episode season is kind of its own arc. If not from a character standpoint, then from a thematic standpoint. where like there'll be an idea that I'm trying to express through the 10 episodes, and it'll get developed, and then it'll reach its conclusion in the 20th episode, and then I start again with another season.
Interesting. Are you putting that stuff out as books or only as audio?
It'll be available in books as soon as I can get it. Just I think so. I'm one chapter away from finishing the first major like arc, which is about 2.5 seasons long. Basically, just a huge plot element of the book. And I'm thinking I'm gonna tie it off there as the first book in the series and release it. It's gonna be about 80,000 words long, which comes out about to 280, 290 pages.
Reasonable.
Yep. Um, and then after that, I'll continue, like, with each major arc, I'll do a paperback release of it. I am, yeah, that's my current plan. The whole reason I made the audio show to begin with, and something that I hope grows over time, is I discovered it's really hard to market indie books, like excruciatingly hard. So I was thinking of ways trying to operate in the online environment that other people aren't really doing. And the first thing that really came to mind is I don't think really audiobooks in general as a practice have really adapted to the online space. They're just essentially they're the same format as they always have been, a one-time purchase. And then you listen to them for like 8 hours and you put it aside. I haven't seen many YouTube channels trying to do audiobooks as their content, or from a subscription model, or from a neo patronage model where you get like $3 subscriptions to an audiobook service. I haven't seen much of that. And I was basically thought, all right, this seems like a business model. I understand why no one really does it. It requires a high upfront cost, high quality production, and it's just generally difficult to do. But I thought, I might as well take my hand at this model and see if I can't make it work for me, because right now the indie sphere is struggling, to put it lightly. I think the AI wave of slop generated content is going to essentially bury us all in an ocean.
I don't know about that, but I do like the idea that you're testing out a model. And I do think that there are lots of ways to explore packaging and distribution. All sorts of kind of different vehicles for putting stuff out there. You might look at packaging in audiobooks, but not as one book. You might do it as this episode in a season. I think that comparatively, if you end up bundling everything within the book that you would turn into a paperback, the cost against how you're doing it with, say, Patreon and these chapter releases inside of a season, it really changes the structure and the profitability, I think, for you in general. But yeah, I do see things breaking through or becoming viable. It really sort of depends. There's you have to kind of hit critical mass on some stuff to attract an audience.
Yeah, that's the difficulty, is, you're always trying to reach that critical mass. And I feel like, the problem is again, it requires a huge upfront cost.
You have a narrator, right? You're not performing.
Yeah, I have a narrator. My voice is not fit for the characters I write, most of them anyway. I could voice one or two characters from Giga Heroes, but I feel my voice is a bit too nasally to properly voice some of the characters.
Bring it down,
Yeah. The other reason I'm trying to move to more independent is Audible and other platforms. They've been really, how do I put this politely? They've been really taking their cut so to speak, from especially from smaller creators. And those platforms are just they're very punishing, and uh, increasingly, I think they have a political bias to basically suppress certain authors.
Maybe.
And I'm not saying that any platform doesn't also come with those issues, but I've found a lot of people voicing their complaints about Audible, and I decided just to steer clear of that service altogether.
Yeah. Audible, I would say, shifting how they're doing, I don't know, subscription crediting and then payouts. I think that's
Yeah.
really going to change the market a lot in general. I think that a lot of things are going to basically shift away from there if they follow the Spotify model, which is horrible. To be honest, Spotify is probably the worst of the large platforms in general. And I do like what you're doing. I do think that like being able to have more direct sale, more kind of or let me invert that, less middleman sort of clutching at the exchange that's occurring, then that's beneficial. Because like you're saying, I mean, if you're having a narrator put stuff together, or you're having somebody do the production for you, that upfront cost is stifling. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what your arrangement is, but like I do know what the prices are out there, and it's costly. For me, I do all my own read and production, so it's a totally different story.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is with cutting out the middleman is that it all falls on you, and the middleman can open connections, and the middleman used to open connections that allowed authors to really explode in the mainstream. Whereas if you're indie, you kind of are left high and dry. I mean, you really need like patronage to make a dent on the mainstream, um, especially with when it comes to books. Like I still see blowout indie video games. I even see indie blowout animated productions. I've never seen an indie blowout author ever that I could talk with a person IRL and they would know what I'm talking about. It's all TradPub. And TradPub, or traditional publishing, for anyone who doesn't know, the big five publishing houses, they've basically shifted all their production to pornography and YA. So like the like I had an encounter where someone, I think it was, they were reading The Court of Thorn and Roses. Um and I was like, "Oh, that smut novel." And that is literally the only interaction I've had with someone like who is reading a book in a public setting that I knew of.
It is unfortunate, they've gravitated towards these genres.
Yeah, I mean, I took my little brother to a bookstore, and he wasn't there to get any Western book. No, he was there to get a Japanese manga, because the state of the industry is so bad nowadays that he's only really interested in reading manga, than any, like, regular books. Um, and I can't really blame him. It's like yeah, I mean, 10 years ago when I was in high school, I mean, they were still coming out with stuff like the Hunger Games, which, well, I didn't think was great. It was passable. I mean, they still put out YA series that every once in a while had something interesting going on for them. But nowadays, it's just utter dreck.
Let's see. Are there any things that we haven't necessarily talked about that you think are important for the listeners to know?
Well, I guess I talk with a lot of indie authors, and they're always looking at the other book releases on Amazon as their competition. And I don't believe that's true. I don't think you're competing with another ex indie author who's getting, maybe a dozen sales a month. Unfortunately, indie authors, we're competing with YouTube, TikTok, video games, basically everything that's an opportunity cost to reading a book. Like, whenever someone sits down to read a book, they're essentially choosing that over playing a video game like Borderlands or Cyberpunk or Dead Space, or all these interactive mediums that provide way more dopamine hits per second than reading ever could. Especially, TV, yada yada. And we had this problem 20 years ago, but now it's just it's gotten so bad that it it's basically like every indie author trying to scrap together an audience from an ever diminishing share of the pie, because most people don't consume culture through books anymore. That's kind of what conservatives don't really understand when they try to set up these publishing houses. Is we're going to change the culture by releasing books, and I'm not saying that's not a commendable thing. It's a very commendable thing. It's a very if we're going to build a culture again, books are the most information dense medium, and we still need that because books serve as fertilizer for these other mediums. But unfortunately, changing the culture is going to look a lot more like indie video games or an animated series than it is a book. And the reason I moved to an audio platform was to try and bridge that gap a little bit. I had one person who reached out to me saying that they loved listening to my show while they were playing Helldivers 2. Um, and that kind of signaled to me that I was on the right track. That if I could exist in a mode where I didn't have to, I didn't have to directly compete with video games, if someone could turn on my show while they played something in the background, that to me is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I think a key component of trying to get your ideas out there. Whereas just, having it on a page, it's just not going to go anywhere 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that if you're going to make a game or you're going to make a film, you still need a script and thereby words.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all about trying to navigate this new environment. I don't think anyone really has mastered it yet. I wonder if I don't see any real big chinks in my model as of yet, other than just the turnaround for production times. It's all a question about whether or not my stories get to a length where they're noticeable on these platforms and they generate an audience. Because unfortunately, you look at these web forums, right? And the stories that take off again are super super long.
Yeah.
So you need to put up a high upfront cost before anyone even pays attention to you, because they don't care about the story that is 200 pages long. They just don't. They care about the story that's going to keep them entertained for the next, half a year minimum. That's what they're looking for fundamentally. And I think that that's actually what delayed me a little bit. It was trying to figure that out. There was a lot of right wing sentiment after the failure of Game of Thrones and Name of the Wind and other series that didn't reach their conclusions. Because a lot of people on the right wing told me, people aren't interested in long form series anymore. They're interested in shorter term work with short, turnarounds, like a anthology series or whatever. When it's actually the opposite. That's the case. I don't think things played out the way a lot of people thought they did. I think people are looking to binge more now than they've ever been. It's just that they've gone on to alternate areas to binge in the various niches that compose the online archipelago.
Hey, Isaac, good conversation. Good to meet you. Good to talk. Where can people find you, engage with your work, and participate?
So I guess my biggest presence is on Twitter, but I like to highlight my YouTube channel under the same name, Isaac Young. Search of Isaac Young, the last human. It should pop up in the recommendations now. Also on web forum sites like Royal Road, Amazon, on Substack. So I guess I have my hands in a lot of places. But you can find my link tree, which is kind of everywhere where I'm at on my Twitter bio.
Very cool. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time, and we'll talk again before too long.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.